You know, there's a saying out there, I hate to say I told you so, and normally I don't. I'm normally a sore winner. I like to rub it in, you know, when I lose I'll go bow out gracefully, but I'll go ahead and rub it in when I win. But in this case, I do hate to say I told you so when it comes to the escalation of World War III. And one of the things I've been saying is that we would almost certainly see conflict open up on other fronts in other arenas, other parts of the world. And just recently we've seen some kind of attack in Iran that a lot of people are saying is probably from, you know, initiated by Israel. We know they don't like each other, they don't get along. They have, in their mind, you know, the Iran getting nuclear weapons is very dangerous for them. And then also we're seeing a leaked memo of some kind come out where a U.S. general's saying that there's going to be war with China in 2 years. Now this is based on his like gut feeling, his assessment of the situation. It's not based on anything automatic, you know, but he probably has some knowledge of the goings on in the international like military intelligence and whatnot that I don't certainly have access to, so he may have more of a reason to think that than even I do. But I already thought this was going to be very likely, and then we've had other people, I know Canadian preppers talked about the one guy, I totally blank on his name right now, who is predicting China is actually going to invade or do something with Taiwan, like move on Taiwan in some form this year, you know, probably in the spring or something, but certainly by the end of the year. So that's very likely to happen. I still think that's the case. But in Iran, obviously, that's one of the things that I mentioned before. We have, you know, Koreas, we have Iran, we have Taiwan and China, and then Middle East with Israel and Iran. And now someone had said because of after this, and I don't believe as of right now that it's officially from Israel, the attack, you know, the drone attack or whatever it is, but there was also some kind of earthquake that like coincided with the attack. So some people are saying that, oh, you know, all these weird conspiracy theories, it's on fault areas, if I'm not mistaken. Seismic activity is not that unusual for the area, but also it could be some kind of massive, you know, some people are saying it was a tactical nuke attack. I think it's more likely that it was maybe an underground nuke test that Iran was doing, which is why they were attacked, trying to stop it or prevent them from doing any more of it. And of course, it's obviously possible that that was just coincidental nuclear activity. Then there's also the people out there that think that we have like satellites that can create earthquakes and stuff, which I have no way to say whether that's true or not, but seems a little bit unusual, like unlikely in my mind. But the point is obviously that this stuff is spreading, and it's obviously not good for anyone to have war expand. We knew it was going to happen, at least I knew it was going to happen, or at least thought it would. It was very likely, and we're certainly seeing that now. I can't imagine that this will just be a one-off incident. I mean, like, the tensions in the Middle East obviously are like a thing of legend in terms of just how ubiquitous it is and how constant. So anything there is likely to cause worse problems, especially with between, you know, basically powerhouses like Iran and Israel. And there's some interesting stuff going on too with regards to Israel specifically and how it relates to both Iran and Russia. And Gonzalo Lira, if you haven't seen anything from him, he's a guy who lived in Ukraine and has some insights into this, just a commentator basically, who's had some pretty good insights into what's going on there so far. He had a good Twitter thread about this to where, I'll just read it for you. He said, so Israel apparently has attacked Iran, targeting factories that I would guess produce components for the drones used by Russia. So that could certainly be the issue. It could be related to nuclear activity and whatnot. He continues, the U.S. and Israel carried out joint military exercises recently, and some U.S. officials visited Jerusalem. This was planned. What does this mean? Quite obviously, the Americans realize that the war is lost in Ukraine, so by giving Israel the green light for this attack, they have two goals. They are trying to degrade the drones that Russia are using, assuming, of course, they are actually manufactured in Iran. Much more importantly, the Americans are also trying to provoke the Russians into escalation and overstretch them. The Americans seek to widen the war by having Russia support Iran and inevitably turn against Israel. Israeli-Russian relations are complicated. By forcing Russia to side with and support Iran, the Americans hope to break the Israeli-Russian relationship as well as create a new front in World War III, because, don't kid yourself, we are in World War III. Will the Russians support Iran? Most definitely. It's in their long-term strategic interests. Will the Russians be overstretched by supporting Iran? No, because Iran has plenty of men and weapons. But politically, diplomatically, this creates all kinds of problems for Israel. The Israelis hate Iran with a passion, but they need the Russians. Apart from all the the family ties between Israelis and Russians. There's a lot of trade, and the Russians have always kept good ties with the Israelis. Netanyahu and Putin personally have a good relationship. Israelis were stupid. They were manipulated by the Americans into giving into their hatred for Iran to the detriment of their long-term best interests, which lie with Russia. This could lead to a disaster for Israel if, because of this attack, the Russians decisively side with Iran, which they likely will, and thus the Israelis are goaded into cutting all ties with Russia. It will only hurt Israel by isolating it from Russia. It would also make them much more dependent on the Americans, and because of this, the Israelis would be easy to manipulate into further attacks on Iran and eventually against Russia itself. Question mark. Maybe? We'll see. Regardless, this is a major escalation in World War III. The battle lines are being drawn by the Americans. End quote. So obviously there's a lot of opinion in there about why some of these things are happening, which I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but it is interesting to see what could be at play, specifically with regarding that interesting, dual relationship between like Israel and Iran, and Israel and Russia, and then to have America mixed in with that as well. So we knew all this complicated situations were there to begin with, and that's why we knew it was extremely likely, or why we should have known, it was extremely likely that this would expand. And like I said, hopefully by now people are realizing that this isn't likely to be over soon in Ukraine, even if, what I've said for months about why I think it's foolish to talk about like winning or losing in Ukraine, or Ukraine winning, or even Russia winning, because at this point there's no good outcomes. The only possible good outcome is if like either side just suddenly gave up, and then it went back to just, the lines between Russia and Ukraine would be slightly different than they were before, or miraculously Russia gives up and then it goes back to their full pre-war stance. But those are obviously, both of those scenarios are pretty much impossible. We've seen that NATO and all these other countries, including Ukraine and any that are related to them in any way, pretty much decided that this is the hill to die on, so to speak, and it's very unlikely that Russia is going to just give up. So we know it's going to just have to reach some sort of conclusion in some other way, which is not good. So obviously this raises the threat of major escalation, i.e. nuclear escalation. So I think that even though I still don't think, I'm still betting on there not being a any sort of major nuclear event, it is certainly possible, and it's more possible than it's ever been. So I definitely think everyone should pick up the few things you would need to be prepared for some sort of incident. And even though like I said, I don't think that there's going to be something like that, I sure am glad that I have my mirror gas mask and my potassium iodide and things like that. Link will be in the description. And they actually have a new product now, which I see if I can get my hands on, which is it's not really a full CBRN mask. You can use the CBRN filters with it that it has, but it's a compact, more of like just a respirator. And it's like $75 versus a few $100s, which these, if you're exclusively getting a gas mask for nuclear preparation, then you're primarily worried about particulate filtration. You don't necessarily need the full CBRN mask, and if you just need to save money, then these are a lot better. And they're much better than simply getting like the P100 ones because of how you can change the filters, the type of filters, they're more robust, things like that. So it doesn't cover like your eyes and your whole face, so there's certain things that it wouldn't necessarily work for. But if you're talking about there's a nuclear explosion, you're downwind of where there might be particulate type stuff and you just don't want to breathe it, this thing would be perfect, and it'll save you a ton of money. So if you just don't have the money to get the full-on CBRN mask like this one, for all the threats, then I would definitely pick up one of these because for like $100 or whatever, you can have mask and filters, and you can get a couple of them you can throw in your car or whatever, and they're more robust than trying to get the Home Depot style one. It's going to be about half that price anyway, and just it's a lot harder to change the filters on the fly and things like that if you're in a contaminated situation. They're not nearly as robust, don't stay on your face as well, that sort of thing. So this thing is really cool. I'm excited about that, and hopefully maybe I can get them to send me one of these. But if you can spring for it, these obviously, the full ones, have much more widespread utility in terms of any sort of event. But I would definitely try to get at least a respirator like that, because it's really not that expensive, and that can make a huge difference. But let me know what you guys think. We're still like always ticking closer and closer to major escalation, which I'm still assuming is going to happen, or at least more widespread, hopefully not to the nuclear level, but it just hammers home the point of why we're prepared in the first place, why you need to have food, water, power backup, potential nuclear preparations, even minor stuff like just the mask and a plan and some potassium iodide, things like that. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll be talking to you soon.